What is up, my friends? It is Monday, and I am back with Mr. David Lynch, and we're going to have a talk around all things Liverpool related, the league in general, and a little bit about Mr. Gary Neville. So, David, to kick us off, and I know you're inside Anfield, I want to start it off by just giving a bit of a positive update to everybody listening. Ibrahima Konate did post about his injury, and this is what he had to say. My injury isn't serious, thankfully. I had a scan today and it confirmed there's no break. I will be ready for the next game. That, David, will be a huge boost to Arne Slot.
Yeah, really good news. We actually kind of got a little cheeky early heads up on this. Some of the reporters who were at the match on Saturday, because Virgil van Dijk kind of told us in the mix zone. He was like, "Well, I've seen him. It's not too bad. He'll be absolutely fine." And I know he isn't a doctor, so he wasn't able. He shouldn't be allowed to give that diagnosis. But he was absolutely right, and no break there. And Kanate's fine. I think just a really really painful one in the end. But really good news that he's okay and available for this one. I mean, to be honest, even if he broke his wrist or something, you'd think he would still be in contention. You shouldn't be using your hands as a defender anyway. But it's good news that he's okay and no break there, and he can come back into the starting 11 against Bayer Leverkusen, which I probably expect he will, to be honest.
It was, of course, Virgil was going to say that, day, but he was putting himself about, trying to say Costa Selva. He was a man on a mission. So yeah, I think maybe Virgil just wanted to make himself feel a little bit better at that moment. But it is, as you said, fantastic news. Now, you were inside Anfield for the game. What were your thoughts when that Mohamed Salah goal went in? Did you go full professional, David, and start sketching down your thoughts, or did you just take it all in for a moment?
Yeah, take it all in. I genuinely did spend the moments after the goal just kind of looking around and just trying to soak it up, because you don't get moments like that very often. I mean, we get more often than not than elsewhere, maybe at Anfield, those moments where you get two goals in 2 minutes and huge turnaround and a huge let off. But yeah, I just looked around me and it was just going absolutely wild. I think, without a question, the best atmosphere so far this season. And I think it's just because the stakes felt so high because of everything else that had gone on, with Arsenal losing and Manchester City were losing at the time as well. And, I think you started to feel a bit of pressure being put on, and people kind of moaning in the first half and groaning. But second half, it was kind of that energy and that nervousness was used for good effect, really, and just created an incredible atmosphere that was, for me, it was just as important as the improvement that Liverpool showed on the pitch. It was the improvement off the pitch as well, and the way that the atmosphere ramped up. Brighton couldn't cope with it. The manager said that after the game as well. So it was huge, really. It was just like the two kind of working together perfectly to create the conditions for Liverpool to turn the game around and win it. So yeah, just one of those where genuinely, and I didn't think I'd be saying this about Brighton at home this season, but a real privilege to be there.
So I do want to come on to the second half and the good stuff, but I also want to credit Brighton, because in that first half we couldn't get near them. We couldn't lay a glove on them at times, and it was testament to the way the managers come in and the way that he has them playing. What were your thoughts inside that first 45 as you watched Brighton have more of the ball, more attacking threat, and just play really well? I know we often look for Liverpool's faults, but you got to credit Brighton. They played really well in that 45.
Yeah, and played in a really brave way as well. I mean, I thought the manager had a really, really good plan for sort of playing through Liverpool's press, which was to kind of drop one of the two holding midfielders in between the centre halves. And Liverpool didn't really know who should be pressing who to pick up, and it always gave them an out then and an extra man to play the ball through Liverpool's formation. So it was a really, really clever plan. But as I say, it takes bravery to do it, and the players really showed that as well. Goalkeeper being comfortable on the ball, baiting the Liverpool press, and then centre backs and holding midfielders being really, really comfortable on it as well, and just finding holes in Liverpool, and they were brilliant. Brighton, they played really well, and always being able to find that spare man. And then the execution on the goal itself as well that they score is phenomenal. I mean, you can't almost criticise too much around what Liverpool do there, because that is a ridiculous striking off the post. Just sometimes you do have to hold your hands up, and I think that was one of those moments. But their overall performance in the first half was excellent as well. And you're right to say, sometimes you do have to just credit that and say that the opposition were very, very good, and for 45 minutes they absolutely were.
There was a ball in behind just that Virgil couldn't reach that ended up with Kelleher making a one-on-one save. If McAllister or one of our boys had played that, we'd probably still be doing victory laps around the back garden. It really was just sensational football, and it's a testament to Brighton as a club, the way that they can keep losing players, changing coaches, but they just have something there, David, and you got to credit them. They're a breath of fresh air to the league. They really are.
Yeah, they're just unbelievable in recruitment. As you say, you can lose players, and they frequently do that. Is the model is to lose players like a McAllister is a really good example of that. But it's all about how you replace them, and to have the hit rate that they do on signings, they so rarely get them wrong. And they do spend money. Don't get me wrong, but they're still shopping at a lower level than some of your big hitters, really, in terms of the money they spend. And they just, as I say, they don't get many wrong at all. And there's a few new players to me there in that lineup today. I mean, the lad who played the passes at Ayari, he looks a really, really handy player. But there's loads of them. It's just a really good team from front to back, and yeah, really, really well run club. And yeah, they bring something different to the Premier League, and they've given Liverpool a couple of really big tests there over the last week.
So, as is always seems to be the case, Arne Slot does something at halftime when things aren't going our way. Now, I listened to your post-match podcast, and I was happy for you when the lawnmower stopped. By the way, I was happy for you. We've all been in that position before. Have you figured out yet what it is Arne Slot did? Because I remember you saying in your post-match show you don't know exactly what he did in that second half, but whatever he did, it made the difference.
Yeah, so what I kind of watched a little bit back this morning, and my thoughts on it were really, it was kind of just changed how Liverpool was set up to press Brighton, in terms of he made sure that Nunes and Szoboszlai, if they were to get jumping into the press onto the centre halves, they were always covering off the two midfielders behind them. Whereas in the first half, it just got a bit ragged, and they were always leaving a man behind them in a free bit of space. And it was so easy to just pop the pass around them. So I think that is something he talked to them about. And because they did that, then it allowed McAllister to have a slightly more aggressive advanced position. So he was always closer to anyone who was kind of dropping in the lines. So that was the tactical tweak. But do you know what? On reflection, as much as that, that's a small tweak, really. And the reason I couldn't really spot it during the game, I think that the tactical tweak, was because it really wasn't as significant. The thing that was massively important for Liverpool in that game, and the reason they won it, was intensity in the second half. And the manager said it in his post-match press conference, actually, that more than the tactical stuff, that was important. And watching it back today, as I say, I actually got that impression again, that it wasn't a huge tweak that he made there. It was just getting into the players and saying, you have got to work harder. You've got to be more intense in your press. And be more physical in there and win challenges, because winning challenges is massively important to winning football matches. And you could see that immediately as he came out for the second half, Liverpool, is that even if they did have an issue where they were pressed around, they were immediately getting back in shape and trying to put pressure on the ball. And it was just that extra little bit of effort. As much as the tactical tweaks are part of football, effort is everything. And I think that the message he got across to the players there in terms of upping the intensity was absolutely vital to Liverpool winning that game in the end, really.
So I think this game for me was changed somewhat with the substitutions that Arne Slot made, and I wanted to focus on the first one, which was Joe Gomez just before half time. He looked extremely comfortable, David, for a guy who hasn't had too much football this season. So this is a bit of a twofold question. Do you agree in his performance that it was a good performance? And secondly, have we seen any interest in Joe ahead of the January window? Because I've got to be honest, that reminded me yet again why I don't want to lose Joe Gomez, because on occasions like that, if it's left back, right back, centre back, he can come in and perform as well as he did.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal sub, which Arne Slot it was obviously forced into it, but it worked out so brilliantly. And again, I'm talking about aggression in that second half. Gomez was massive for that, because he was basically, and this is something Konate didn't do in the first half, but would probably have been told to do, but in the second half had he come out for it. But Gomez did a really good job of this. Is that one of the ways that Brighton were trying to make an extra man all the time was Welbeck dropping in, and Gomez would just follow him. And as soon as the ball came anywhere near him, he was in there, he was nicking the ball, he was getting front-footed, he was beating him in the air. Literally, again, every challenge that he contested in that second half, he seemed to win up against Welbeck, who'd been so threatening in that first half. So phenomenal performance. And I gave him man of the match in my ratings. That's how highly I rated him. And he was only on the pitch for 45 minutes. So thought he was phenomenal. But it's interesting, really, is, I've seen Joe Gomez as kind of a candidate for a January departure, and I'm sure there will be interest in him there. But I wonder whether Liverpool will just be a little bit reluctant now. I think they acknowledge that in the long term, they need to let him go to go and play more football, because he remains kind of third choice right back, probably third choice left back. Maybe he could push up against Robertson with the way his form is at the moment. he's maybe getting up to third choice centre half now at the moment, with Quanta maybe not being quite fancied at the minute and struggling a little bit. But he'll want more than that. He wants to be first choice. He want to be starting every game for someone out there, and Liverpool acknowledge that. But there's an opportunity here, I think, with Liverpool being in contention at the moment and doing really well, to just say to him, look, just do us another half season. Be the squad man here for another half a season. Let's see what we can win, and then we'll let you go. And I'm sure there will be plenty of interest, because I just think he showed really in that game there that he'll be kind of shooting themselves in the foot a little bit, really, for Liverpool to let him go in January. So I wonder whether they'll just block that again and say, let's look at it again in the summer, and then we'll give you your move, because they were willing to do it in the summer. They were willing to let him get that move if the right money came in and the right move for him came. But I just think they'll hold back now in January and just push it back and kick the can down the road a little bit.
Whatever happens, he needs to get that goal before he leaves. And I thought he might have got it, mate, at the weekend. 2 headers, 2 great positions he got himself into as well, and just the goalkeeper was in the right spot, unfortunately.
Yeah, so unlucky. I really, it would have been great for him to get the winner, because it would have just capped off a perfect performance from him. But yeah, surely he's going to get it at some point soon. I mean, he's showing now that he can pop up in the right positions. The work that Liverpool are doing on set pieces as well maybe gives him an opportunity to finally kind of break that duck, because a lot of it is about getting Konate and Van Dijk into positions. So you centre half. So if he's subbing in for one of them, there's every chance he can get there and get it. So yeah, if he does leave at the end of this season, then I would absolutely love for him to have got a goal at some point.
So I want to move on to Trent now, because you've rightly been speaking about trying to change this narrative about his defensive work. And I think you've got some numbers into how many battles and that he won on the pitch. But once again, that was a performance where I actually wanted more from him going forward and his passing, but I was more than content, David, with his defensive work of the weekend.
Yeah, this is it. I think we've got to kind of acknowledge that, some games it's just not going to work out for him on the ball, particularly because he's kind of he's a high risk player, isn't he? You want him to take those risks to try and get Liverpool into positions and playing those. You can call them Hollywood balls. That kind of that's the stuff you're kind of looking for at times from him. But there are going to be days where that doesn't work out, because the opposition has got a good plan for him. They're putting him under pressure, or they're cutting off who he can pass to, and they're marking them very tightly. So when days like that happen, what you want him to do is to be a good right back and to be the guy who nothing comes down his side. He locks it down defensively. And I just think more and more this season, he's absolutely showing that. I mean, his performance, if he'd have been poor defensively at the weekend, it would have been a poor performance and it would have really hurt Liverpool. But what he did is, okay, I can't influence this going forward. It's not absolutely working for me. So I'm just going to lock this down. And Brighton tried again to hurt him down that side, getting the ball to Matoma. And I mean, he couldn't shut him down every single time, but mostly he did. And similarly with Adingra came on at the end, fresh legs, and showed a bit of threat. But I thought still a few challenges that Trent won there. And I mean, just looking at the numbers now, actually, 12 out of 16 ground duels won. I mean, the fact he's contesting 16 ground duels shows you just how involved he was. They were really targeting. But to win 12 is a phenomenal effort. It's as good as any defender you will see, really, down fullback. So really, really good numbers. And again, it's just he's showing such a rounded game at the moment. Just really kind of underlines how good he is and how important it is for Liverpool to keep hold of him.
You wouldn't think it, though. He listened to Roy Keane at times. Still, with his lazy takes, it does my head in. It really does, David. Because look, if a player deserves criticism, we can have that conversation. But like you've pointed out, we've pointed out, many others have pointed out, there's been a marked difference in Trent Alexander-Arnold's defensive work since Arne came in. I remember reading actually an interview with Simon Rimmer about Trent, and he was talking about that 8-degree body change in his positioning and just small details. And he really seemed to be enjoying life working under Arne Slot. So is he going to stay at the club, David?
Well, I do think that's a big influence, though. Look, if he's being given, advice that he likes taking on board, if he feels like this manager's improving him, particularly he's talked about the Ballon d'Or. Okay, if you're going to win the Ballon d'Or, you've got to be great on both sides of the ball. That'll be the question of him. You're going to be a great fullback. You have to do everything well. And so, clearly it seems like he's enjoying taking that advice on. He liked the way that Slot goes about teaching him as well. And also, Liverpool look really, really good. They look like they're going to challenge for major trophies this season. So again, that is another reason for him to maybe want to stay at the club. So to know that Liverpool are going to be challenging despite the fact they've changed managers. So, I think all the signs are there and encouraging for him that this club is very serious and wants to win major honours in the coming seasons and this season, actually, for starters. It's just about finding that agreement on the numbers. But, again, I would always say about the Trent situation, if he leaves, it'll be because he wants to play for Real Madrid. It won't be because Liverpool haven't done enough to keep him, because they know what they'd be losing. A player coming into his peak, they will pay him an outrageous sum. I'd wager a lot of money. It's going to be big money being put in front of him and a long-term contract. And I'm just sure Liverpool will be absolutely desperate to get it done. And so if he goes, I think it will just be because he wants to try something new. But I still, as I always say, sort of tend to optimism on this one. I think Liverpool will get it done.
I just wonder though, if the worst came to the worst and he'd made up his mind, let's say in December, that he wants to go to Madrid, just hear me out for a second. How do you communicate that to the club, and then how does that get communicated to, I guess, a fan base? Because it's a long time between now and the end of the season, and the longer this lack of communication comes on, it's just going to lead, I think, into more worry and more anxiety in the fan base. So do you think whatever the decision might be, we're going to get some type of communication about what Trent's future is, whether that be a new deal or whether that be a move elsewhere?
Yeah, I suspect in a situation like this, the way that would play out was obviously that Trent will tell the club through the sporting director or whatever. But then in terms of how that news will come out, I doubt Liverpool will be making an official announcement about Trent deciding to leave. I suspect it will come out through favoured journalists, to be honest. Just knowing how these situations have tended to be and tended to play out, is that, it will kind of leak out, really. And if it's bad news, but obviously if it's good news, again, it will probably be leaked out to favourable journalists in the same way. It'll come out of nowhere and then the agreement will be done. So, and there's still a little bit of time, isn't there, to January, where, that becomes a real consideration. And again, until we hear anything along the lines of, Trent's not going to sign, he's told the club, then I think you still think that the talks are ongoing, that negotiation is happening now, and we just wait and see for it to come to its conclusion. But as I say, Liverpool will be throwing absolutely everything at this because they know they can't afford to lose him.
While we're talking about fullbacks, I want to take a second to just acknowledge a good performance again, and an able deputy this season with Tsimikas, who came in and he didn't miss a beat. I thought that he is really now starting to give Arna a headache on that left-hand side. Some of his performances have been a lot better for me than in previous seasons, and I just want to take a second just to credit Costas for his professionalism and taking those opportunities when they come his way.
Yeah, he's been really, really good. I mean, he genuinely is in contention now with Andy Robertson, isn't he, for that left-back slot? And I think it's really interesting, actually, to see what kind of happens on Tuesday night. We will get a little bit of an idea, really, of who's first choice there, because it could be an argument that, say, Tsimikas came in for the league game against Brighton on the basis that Andy Robertson could then do the next two. He could do Leverkusen and then Aston Villa back-to-back. But I think if Tsimikas starts either of those, then maybe you're getting a clear indication he's just slightly ahead in the pecking order at the moment. And if he is, it would be fully deserved. I mean, I don't think he's ever been as bad as, some of his critics have made out. For me, he's always been a really dependable backup, but he's shown he can be a little bit more than that this season. And, he is edging into that first choice territory. I mean, his defending, I think there has been some improvement there, similarly to Trent, in terms of how he approaches it and that determination in the tackle, but also some of the technical elements around it. He looks really solid and he's part of a solid back four. But then he's always had that quality going forward as well. His crossing is fantastic and really dangerous, and his set piece delivery is a massive help as well. And when he's swinging him in from that side, it creates chaos 9 times out of 10. So, yeah, he's got an awful lot to offer. I still would say that left back is a spot that Liverpool need to look at in the coming transfer windows, certainly the next two. But at the moment, Tsimikas is doing a really solid job there at left back.
So Mohamed Salah showed us all yet again why he is a difference maker, and I really enjoyed the post he put out as well, where he said, "Top of the table is where this club belongs, nothing less. All teams win matches, but there's only one champion in the end. That's what we want. Thank you for your support last night. No matter what happens, I'll never forget what scoring at Anfield feels like." Now, you know where I'm going to go with this, David. That last line, I hope that isn't teasing us with something negative, because as I started off with this little segment, he did remind us again exactly why he's held in such high regard by foreign coaches, players, managers, us, opposition fans, pundits. He is just the real deal, David. And that was lift off, I think was the right phrase when he scored that goal at the weekend. He took it so well.
Yeah, but there's no question how good he is. Really, is there? I think the big question is for Liverpool, and this is why these contract negotiations will drag on, and this one's a difficult one. Is how long will he be at this level for? How long will he sustain this? And when will that be happening in almost 4 years' time at the end of a 3-year contract? They would argue probably not. So that's where Liverpool do need to find some compromise with him, don't they? And it's a tricky one. With that cryptic message he tweeted out, you're clearly trying to put a little bit of pressure on Liverpool and get the fans on side, and it absolutely worked. By the way, everyone, I saw the responses to it, and a few people atting Liverpool and tagging them in it to tell them what they thought. So he's clearly working things like that, and that's fair enough. He's absolutely entitled to do it, but I don't think it actually will put much pressure on Liverpool. They'll try and make a cool-headed business decision around this and what's best for the club. And it is a tricky one, even though people, even after performances like that, it makes it seem like it's just straightforward to give him what he wants. I still lean towards the idea that you've got to be careful with that one, and there's a real threat that at some point he declines, and you've got a huge wage on the books that's hard to shift. So it is, I think, a trickier one. But I think he's sending the message there, isn't he? And it's worth saying as well that even before he signed his last contract, there were the few cryptic tweets. There were cryptic tweets from him, from his agent, and then it ended up getting resolved. So I wouldn't worry too much about what that means, and whether that means it's over, he's not going to sign an extension. But as ever with all of them, we've got to just kind of keep our ear to the ground and see how it plays out.
Well, there was some, I'm going to be polite here and say, very questionable reports that Virgil van Dijk had agreed an extension at the football club, put out there by nefarious sources, I'm going to say, because nothing annoys me more, David, than people intentionally going out of their way to lie to their fellow Liverpool fans. So I just wanted to know if you've heard anything positive around Virgil to substantiate these very, very dodgy claims, is what I'm going to say.
Yeah, no, nothing, no update on that so far, unfortunately. Still, same with the others, still ongoing. Again, though, I always say with that one, I feel a bit of positivity around it. And again, he's desperate to stay. I think Liverpool see there's value in him. He's captain. He's playing at a ridiculous level, and I still think he can do that for at least a couple more years. So yeah, I'm still hopeful around that one, but talks ongoing. No developments in terms of that being done just yet.
There was also a bit of a link during the week to a player from Brighton, actually, in Carlos Baleba. And I just wanted to ask you if you'd heard anything of Liverpool keeping tabs on him since, I think it was Lille, maybe he joined from. And it wasn't just Liverpool, to be fair, that was linked with him, but apparently there's a number of Premier League clubs already taking a look at Baleba. It just, again, speaks to Brighton's great transfer business.
Yeah, I wouldn't be hugely surprised, to be honest, that he would have been on their radar, particularly even when he was at Lille, because he tends to sort of keep an eye on similar players to Brighton, trying to find those kind of undervalued gems in other leagues, and he's absolutely one of them. I think he's a brilliant player. Big question around him is kind of profile-wise, whether he's exactly what Liverpool are looking for in central midfield at the moment. We've talked about that, how that's kind of changed and a little bit different. And maybe that will have effect on whether he would be on the shortlist in the long term going forward. But it's an interesting link, and I dare say they keep an eye on a few Brighton players, thinking that they might, that they could be the next step for them, because they just play a great brand of football. They're all comfortable. They're all really good physically, and yeah, he's another one of those. I think he's a really good player.
I wanted to move on for a little conversation before we finish up around Gary Neville, but just before I do, Omar Marmoush, I think it's long established that Liverpool are at the least keeping tabs on Omar Marmoush's future at Frankfurt. But the question I have for you isn't so much around our interest, just if we were to make a move for Marmoush or any other attacking player, would you see it because maybe we're looking to move somebody on, or in case we don't agree a contract extension? I'm just trying to figure out why we'd be looking at attacking players, if there's, the potential for someone to leave, or if it's just because we're keeping tabs on the good players in Europe.
Well, that's it. You've got to be ready to respond. So this is why I'm always kind of skeptical about some of these stories about, that Liverpool are looking at and people get excited about it. But the reality is they're looking at so many players, many of whom they probably will never need to sign, or, in positions where they won't have a need for the next 6 years. But they just got to keep an eye on players. because you don't know what's going to happen. It's impossible to plan the future. You've just got to be ready for the possible outcomes that are coming at you. So, he's kind of one of them. And I would suggest that, yes, if they will be looking at Marmoush because of the figures he's putting up in a top league and his age. But one of the things that would have to happen for me is movement in that attacking. They've got 6 forwards there, all on decent wages, all, players who you'd like to see getting a good chunk of minutes. So the idea that you would add another without selling someone up, say Darwin Núñez's form drops off again and you think, okay, we can't keep trying this, then, there's an opening there. Or if they can't agree a contract with Mo Salah, these are all factors that Liverpool will be considering. But the idea of them adding another forward without losing one doesn't really make sense to me.
So Gary Neville feels like Arsenal are still favourites in his mind to go on and win the title. And I just wonder, David, has he dug this hole a little bit too deep and he can't see out of it at this point? Because I've not seen anything to suggest that that's warranted. Now, of course, Arsenal are a very good side and they'll be in the mix, but to speak about them so adamantly as title favourites, I don't think we've seen that played out on the pitch yet this season, David, from Arsenal, Mikel Arteta, in any way to justify this hubris from Gary Neville. Your thoughts on Arsenal being Arsenal going to go and win the title still at this point? I think it's too early to call it for anybody, let alone Arsenal.
Yeah, I just don't know why you would stick to that view at the end of the day, because I just think you've got to use the evidence that's available to you to make a judgment. And sometimes that means changing your mind. That's absolutely allowed. It doesn't make you a fool to have made a football prediction and then change it. I mean, I remember probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think when the Rodri injury happened and Man City dropped points at Newcastle, I tweeted myself that, I think there's potential for City to drop more points than they usually would in a season without him. I think they will miss him, and I think we've maybe seen that since that might be an issue. But in that tweet, I also said I fancy Arsenal to be the ones who capitalise, because for me, the last 2 seasons they've had have been fantastic. They looked like they were building towards it. And I know they'd had a few kind of wonky results early in the season, but they also kept getting red cards in unfortunate moments and kind of, and they'd had quite a difficult start on paper. So I thought that was a factor for Arsenal. But then, I don't know how you can, I'm not going to stick to that prediction blindly now that they're 7 points behind Liverpool already and 5 points behind Manchester City and some of the performances we're seeing from them. I think, you're right to say it would be madness to write them off completely. And I think they'll absolutely be up there. They'll be top 3 at the absolute worst. There's no doubt about that in my mind. But to say he's sticking with them as favourites is very questionable to me. I just, I'm not sticking with them as favourites now. I think they're a long way from favourites. They're already a long way back in the title race, and losing at the weekend with Liverpool winning was a bit of a disaster for them, really. And they've already dropped, I think, half as many points as they did in the entirety of last season. So their room for manoeuvre is absolutely tiny. So yeah, you're allowed to change your opinion, and I would not be installing Arsenal as favourites at this moment on the basis of what we've seen so far.
There's every chance this weekend they play Chelsea, we play Villa. Even if they were to draw and we eked out a win, that's just, again, extending it. And this is in our period of games where we were spoken about as having a very difficult run.
Yeah, and I mean, and also you've got to say, there's only so far you can fall behind. One of the things of Arsenal in the last 2 seasons is obviously, not last season, the season before, they led for a long time and then kind of fell away slightly. And then last season they were there to the death, but they've never really had to be chasers. They've always been the side that's out there near the front. They've never had to chase down a big lead. And so I'm kind of sceptical about whether they can do that. And if, it's already 7 points to Liverpool now, that can easily swing to 4 in one weekend. But if it gets to anything like 9, you're starting to get into territory where that is almost impossible to close up. And you have to go on almost a sort of 18-game winning streak to get to that sort of, to close that gap up. So, you can't give yourself too much to do. So, it's already getting to the point where you're thinking, a couple more bad results and you start saying they're out of the title race. That's the situation they find themselves in. So, they've got to be very, very careful and not writing them off yet. But again, as I say, wouldn't be putting them in as favourites anymore, even though I maybe mentioned that a few weeks ago. I've absolutely changed my mind on that one because they've got a hell of a lot of work to do.
So, Dave, this is the point of the show where I ask you what you've got coming up, but I kind of know what you've got coming up, and it's a tasty game against Bayer Leverkusen tomorrow, welcoming Xabi Alonso back. And, I'm often jealous of you guys, but tomorrow I'm particularly jealous because I can imagine it's going to be a really great game, a good atmosphere, and an interesting welcome back for Xabi Alonso. He'll be welcomed until the first whistle, I'm sure, and then welcomed again after the final whistle. But what are you looking forward to from this week ahead? Obviously, Leverkusen and Villa, and your content as well, what you've got coming up.
Yeah, I am. I am looking forward to both games. I think both are going to be really good. I think Leverkusen's a really good test. Also, a bit of an opportunity for Arne Slot to get one over on Xabi Alonso. I know, I wrote about this on Substack today. If people want to check it out, about the idea that Xabi Alonso was never Liverpool's first choice. He didn't ever get that status in the recruitment process. But even so, with the start that Arne Slot's had, to kind of get one over him, if there's anybody who's got any lingering doubts, I think it would be nice for Arne Slot to kind of finally quieten those down and get the result there. So, and it's the Champions League, so always look forward to that. And then obviously the Villa game, it being a late kickoff on a Saturday, if there's any drop points before that from anyone, it could be absolutely raucous. So really, really looking forward to that. And yeah, as ever, I'll be at both games. So, if you want to subscribe on YouTube to catch my post-match reviews, and always looking for people to subscribe to Substack if you want to fancy giving it a go. I've got loads of pieces up on there, including that Alonso one with. I like to think every piece has got a bit of insight that maybe people didn't know about. So please do check that out at davidlynchlfc.co.uk.
As always, David, thank you so much for your time, and thank you to you guys for listening and watching. We look forward to reading your comments as well. We'll be back soon. Until then, enjoy the week ahead, my friends, and we'll talk soon. Much love. Bye-bye. Perfect.